And also they want to find that low-hanging fruit or first project or proof of concept. And all regions try to do that and think that maybe we have another. No, you probably have the same low-hanging fruits and could probably benefit from learning from each other instead and try to do things on a national scale. And also that you cannot share data between regions. And if we want to train really good AI models on healthcare data from Sweden, then we need to be able to do that. And we have the life science strategy and a lot of things happening. But still, we don't really see the national leadership on really doing this and commitment from politicians and others. So it's a lot. Almost everything is driven from the regions, I would say.
So this is super interesting, of course, because we're talking about how to improve collaboration, co-creation, interoperability, or harvest and reusing between each other in relation to AI and data in healthcare. And interestingly enough, I think the whole world is moving in more distributed setups, ecosystems. These sort of central monolithic approaches to organization or to systems seems to not move fast enough or be very, very challenging to get everybody inside the same. I can argue that for any industry, and you can go all the way into a very modern company like I would argue Spotify, who are sort of the fundamental architecture is much more microservices or technically, and how we think about organization very, very different. So isn't this something also about breaking free from the central command and control type Tayloristic management and leadership and going more to more distributed organizational, collaborative organizational models and stuff like that? So sort of the old ways or fundamental structures we have is not really clearing out the mandates and for this.
Yes, and we try to do this in a decentralized way in several ways, yes. I would say, also by trying to actually train models in a decentralized way, because we don't see that we will, in the near future, have all healthcare data at one place. So we need to see, can we build these kind of models between hospitals? And we actually have a first example of Region Halland and Sahlgrenska Hospital that is actually trying to train models in a federated way between each other. So they start with non-sensitive data, of course, but if you worked with regions a lot and hospitals, this is a big step for them to collaborate. Yeah. And then we also actually have IMY as part of this project.
So they're part of this specific project as well?
So the Integritetsskyddsmyndigheten is Data Protection Agency is part of the project to follow and to learn, which is a new role for them. But it's really interesting to see how we can get this kind of collaborations happen.
And ultimately now we can learn. Technically, we have understood that this needs to be federated in order to share data without, sharing data, so to speak, and all this. That means our architecture needs to go in this way, but it ultimately doesn't mean our organizational design or the way we are organizing and teaming up needs to sort of fit the same patterns. I mean, like if we have a central organizing pattern organizationally, when what we are managing is decentralized, the organizational structure is an anti-pattern for this. So when you're now trying to figure out how to organize this,
actually, the regions are actually decentralized
very
already.
Decentralized.
So, yes, in this case, it's actually not the case.
Yeah, but they are decentralized orphans. They're not decentralized federative, I would argue.
Yes, but they are decentralized at least, and they need to collaborate more. Yes. So, but the question is then really, how can technology help with that, right?
Well, what can we learn from what we do in technology in how we need to organize? Like the thesis here is a little bit like, well, if you want to federate the model, you need to work in a certain way where something is centrally managing the federation technically, and then you have your different data points. It's like this. If you flip that to an organizational design, we only have the decentralized parts. We don't have the federation part. We don't have the infrastructure, the organizational structures. So, what can we learn from the technical setup that sort of needs to...
Feel free to disagree as well.
Yeah, but I think
what do you think the main challenge is for regions to start to collaborate more?
I think that they need to get to know each other. I think it is kind of simple as that.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess.
And because it's very easy to call your neighbors and call your friends.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time in Sweden, not only when working with regions, but working with companies and others. You call your local university or you call your friends that you're usually collaborating with, but it's not sure that they are best suited to solve the problem.
Right.
So what if we could make sure that more people know about different parts of what is happening in Linköping, for example, or what is happening in Luleå, and what are the strengths of Chalmers and KTH and others, or this organization may have a challenge that is similar to this organization. And I think that is the strength of also when we're working with both the public sector and the private sector, and we work with the regions, and we can see that, okay, this is a similar challenge that Volvo has, for example, or Scania or others, and then we can try to find common projects and things like that. So it's not just cross regions, it's also between different domains and different industries.
Right. And isn't that the, AI Sweden, of course, has a super important goal here to try to do knowledge sharing, as you say, to just build up that understanding. It's not just about the physical, regional distance, it's about different domains as well. And AI in some ways, GPT, a general purpose technology that can be used across regions, but also across domains.
Yes.
Right? So you had some meeting with them today, or you spoke to some region, or trying to work with that, or?
Yeah. So having project meetings and trying to figure out what next step is. So we have a kind of reference group where we have 18 out of 21 regions right now. So we are almost there to at least have one point of contact at kind of the right level at least.
Just for healthcare or for?
Yeah, this is for healthcare. So talking about regions, we're working with regions in other ways as well, but this is for healthcare.
But I think before we get into the meat of things, we should do a proper introduction here of Johanna Bergman. Very nice to have you as guest here today. Head of Strategic Initiatives at AI Sweden, with a very interesting background, being part of that journey since its inception.
Yeah.
But let's rewind the tape a little bit and basically, get to know you a little bit, Johanna, as a way to understand, your thinking and experiences and your learnings in these areas. So let's start off from the very basic question, or maybe the hardest question: who is Johanna?
I think it's a lot of answers to that question, actually. But yes, I grew up in Halmstad and did a lot of track and field and sports growing up. Actually started and I was not that good at running and jumping, but I really loved it. And then I just counted the days until I could become a coach. So when I turned 14, I was just, okay, now I'm going to coach instead.
14 years old?
Yeah.
Really?
So I continued training myself, but I also had this kind of, I really it was something with leadership already then, I think. So I always had that. And then...
You remember why this coaching part was something you were aspiring to?
I don't know. It was just that I was counting the days. I want to start coaching.
Interesting.
And I did that I haven't started here since I moved to Stockholm a year ago, but I did it for many, many years.
For what kind of sports?
Track and field, yeah. So.
And in certain areas or disciplines?
No, most events, but sprinting, and then I started doing hammer throw as well.
Throw.
What's that?
When you have like a chain and a ball in the end, and then you do.
That's the hammer throw.
Yes. But then, after studying natural sciences, I thought of maybe I should be a doctor or study medical school, or should I go for engineering? And then I found a new program at LTH in Lund called biomedical engineering, and it was just the second year of that. So this was 2012. So I moved to Lund and started studying biomedical engineering.
Combine both your interests,
Yes.
both medical engineering then? So what is really biomedical, medical?
Biomagical. I like that.
Biomedical engineering. What's that?
It's almost everything that has to like medicine and engineering. So you can go take a lot of different tracks from that. But it was really an interdisciplinary program from the beginning. So we were out at the hospital doing like this. We are following doctors and nurses and trying to understand how the equipment was used. And then we had a lot of statistic courses and data and things like that. And e-health and design, and so it was a lot of.
And do you remember starting up this course, so to speak? What was the gap that was needed to be filled, or what was the sort of path that was sort of? Why did they need to start a new course, and what did they anticipate as this is the type of roles we need to fill?
I think one reason was that. They were really strong at signal processing at LTH and medical signal processing, and they wanted to build on that, I think. And then I think they wanted to try kind of a new type of engineering program with a lot of like collaborative work and projects, courses, and have this interdisciplinary focus, and not starting out from electrical engineering, for example, but we started from like both have the medical courses and cell biology and physiology and also the basic engineering courses, of course.
What's basic engineering? Was it programming or what was it?
Yeah, and mechanics and physics and everything that you.
Yeah.
And do you think this is a very interesting setup? It's cross-disciplinary, intersectional at its core when it's incepted. Do you think you have taken, what's your key takeaway? So, how has this shaped you that already in university you went on in this path? I think there are many things that are very interesting.
Yeah, I think most of all understanding that you need to be the translator, translate between the domain knowledge that is medicine and healthcare in this case to the technical domain. And be the translator between, and that is something I do every day now.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
And will we ever have a future when there's not a topic of translation, but we are infused?
Let's see.
And have a common language.
When we can change the medical school and their courses.
Or have a Neuralink chip installed in the brain
true,
as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
But that was, and then I thought that I would work with stem cells. That was I want to be in the lab and work with cells. But then I had a course in time series analysis and realized that the power of data and what you can do with data, because that was the first course where we worked with real data, I think. So we tried to predict the energy consumption in a small city in Denmark, I think. And I was just realizing that, wow, what if we could do this for healthcare? So that was when I really understood that I want to work with healthcare and I want to work with data. That was what I thought of then. And then when I finished, I was starting to talk to a lot of different companies.
What did you think you were going for at that point? What were you looking for?
I was looking for somewhere where I could work with healthcare and data.
Okay, cool.
And e-health, and like how can we be much more preventive and proactive in healthcare instead of reactive. So that was what I was telling all companies that I talked to. I want to work with this. And then they said, yeah, you can come back in 5 years because we want to hire you as a project manager. But you need to start coding or start with CAD or anything. And then I said, I'm not really good at that. And then I contacted almost all like e-health companies in Gothenburg because I was moving to Gothenburg then. And then I come in contact with Lindholmen Science Park because they had a program called PICTA, which is Pre-Hospital ICT Arena, working with healthcare projects, e-health projects in a collaborative way, very similar to what I do today. And then I happened to start the first AI project that we had. That was to predict sepsis in the ambulance, that is blood poisoning. And then we got the Minister of Energy, I think at that point, or digitalization, came to Lindholmen and said, "You are going to start an AI center in Sweden."
Was it Bailan or who was it?
Mikael Damberg, I think.
Damberg, yeah, of course.
I think so.
Yeah, it would have been Damberg, I think.
And I was at that press conference, and then I thought, yes, can I be part of this? Can I do this? And then we started working with AI Sweden. So that was really what led to what.
So this is Lindholmen Science Park. Can you just describe what that is?
So that is both a physical place in Gothenburg. The history is that it was an old shipyard, abandoned in the 90s. And then Ericsson came and said, yes, we can be here, but we want other companies to be here as well. And then Lindholmen Science Park started to really make sure that this was going to be an interesting place. And then Lindholmen Science Park really grew into also be this kind of collaborative arena for projects, mainly in automotive and mobility and transportation, I would say.
I need a fun anecdote. My first real job after university was with a consultancy called Simpro, working towards the automotive space, and we had our offices in Lindholmen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
So, took färjesnabben,
Yep.
And I even got my first own apartment på Östra Stilletorpsgatan up on Ramundberget, so I could walk to
But that's a really nice commute. I was commuting by the ferry when I lived in Gothenburg, and that was really nice.
It's cool.
Go by your bike, and then you take the ferry, and then...
It's in Lindholmen, and then you go further and further out to Götaverken and Eriksberg. Yeah. So Lindholmen is nice.
Yeah,
cool.
There's some really nice offices there, I think.
Yeah, there are many interesting offices there.
Cool. And perhaps should we move to AI Sweden and how that got started, or what do you think, Henrik?
I was just trying to summarize. I mean, so one of the main pivotal moments here was that time series class.
Yes,
when you
definitely.
really get exposed to real data, and that sort of took you in a certain direction, and then you ended up in Lindholmen, and then you happened to be in Lindholmen at the right time, at the inception of the actual press conference.
Yep.
For we need to have a center here. So I would like to go into the topic of AI Sweden. A little bit like that. Storytelling, how did that all happen? So then we can come into the what is AI Sweden, but a little bit like, tell us the birth story here, how you experienced it.
Yes, and I know that it's a long history before I was standing at the press conference, but I think I would start at the press conference. So that was in May 2018, I think, and that was almost all information we got, that we need a center for applied AI innovation in Sweden. And we started working, it was me and Martin Svensson, one of the co-directors. He was also at Lindholmen working with other things at that point, but also raising his hand and jumping.
So how did that work? Did someone come, okay, you heard it, we have an assignment here, can someone draft the first one-pager on this, or how did it actually go about?
Yeah, kind of. And the reason they came to Lindholmen is because of the track record of building collaborative environments and get a lot of partners to work together, even get Scania and Volvo to work together in a project and things like that. So that was the reason why they came to Lindholmen. And then we started to basically talking to everyone we could think of. And that, of course, we started in Gothenburg, and it was a bit Gothenburg focused, but we talked very early on this, I think.
Yeah, what was that? Could we tap into how did you guys meet first time?
I think it was elements of AI, maybe.
I think it was before when we went to Canada as well. And
yeah,
things
okay,
like that.
yeah.
So it was before that, I think, but I don't recall actually when it first started. But
but that was
Mats Nordlund and others, were
yeah.
part of this very early on as well.
Yeah. So we started just talking to and understanding what it should be.
Let's see. This is, you said that May 2000.
That was the press conference, but the work started really in the autumn. And then it was this trip to Canada. I wasn't part of it, but that was...
it was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I heard a lot about it. So.
And this was more or less to get some inspiration from how they've done similar journeys in Canada. They were there a couple of years ahead, maybe, at that point.
We try to identify some successful places in the world where they've been able to not only do research in AI, but actually make use of it in industry in a proper way. And one of the best places that we could identify was actually Canada. And we know, of course, that Canada is also the home of the deep learning pioneers of Jan LeCun and Hinton, etc. But they do more than that. So they have a lot of incubators, and in some way, they also have these kind of super clusters and a lot of things where the government really got involved, trying to also not just have the academia, but actually put it in industry, and in some way been able to build up really successful companies there. So they seem to have some kind of more structured, well thought through approach to also make use of AI. So that's why we went there and tried to learn, what they have done.
Yeah, now we actually have one person in Montreal in Canada.
Really?
So Peter Kursvelli,
of course.
He moved there for last year. It was a bit delayed due to the pandemic, but we decided kind of early to also establish ourselves there to learn and to be able to build concrete collaboration. So he moved there a year ago, which is really good. But then, we started doing this kind of pre-study to understand and to get a lot of partners on board. And I think at that time, some organizations really realized that we need to do something with AI. We don't really understand what it is, but maybe this is a good way of engaging and starting. So it was, I would say we had this clear idea of that we need to build this in collaboration. We need to build concrete collaborative projects. We need to work nationally. We need to be this neutral part. We are not academia. We're not public sector. We're not and we're non-for-profit, and because that is important. So we had some key things, but then it was really an exploratory journey, I would say. And we had the inauguration in February 2019 with 40 partners, I think. And then we also had the formal support from Vinnova and funding for the first 3 years settled. And and then after the inauguration, we just had to, okay, what now? Now we need to start doing things, and we are 2 or 3 people. But the partner network and getting organizations engaged and involved has been key from the beginning. And then we also set our mission, that is to accelerate the use of AI to the benefit of society, competitiveness, and everyone living in Sweden or something like that.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I think so too. I said it a couple of times. And that is very, very broad. And that is broad by purpose, because we want to be able to take the whole perspective but it's also very important that we work to complement other things that is already happening, not invent things again and not compete with other initiatives. We want to...
Isn't that a good way to phrase it? I mean, there are some things that we could easily see that it's necessary for Sweden to accelerate AI, but there are also things that I guess AI Sweden should not do.
Definitely.
Right? Could that be a good way to try to define what the mission is and what they should not do potentially? Or can you try to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I would say that the key here is applied. Everything we should do should be applied. So from the beginning we said we will not do research, but then I think right now we're actually doing research, but it's in a very, very applied way. And when you do new things in AI in an applied way, it becomes research because it's new. No one has done it. So that's but we are not VAS. We are not educating in that way. Like they set up AI competence for Sweden at the same point to really reskill a lot of people in Sweden.
So that was another government initiative to try to have some more AI education by the universities then, I guess, for companies as well.
So we should be complementary to that as well. And I think one important part is we are not consultants and will not be. We are not working in one-to-one projects. That's I don't think we have any examples of that. We would try to work with a lot of actors at the same time.
Mark Zuckerberg, we're here to connect people.
Yes.
It's not going well for Mark right now, but
But I say that is what we try to really work. Collaboration is everything, working cross industry, cross sector, academia and public sector and industry together, and like find this kind of really good collaborations is key, and then also incorporate and build on things that is good, that is already happening, and boost good examples. And
And now, a couple of years into the journey, how would you describe on a basic level, but a little bit more practical, how does that work? How would you explain the operating model, or how you organized it, and how you can live up to what you're saying, sort of? How is it working in practice?
Yes, first of all, it's super hard to measure.
Yeah.
Are we accelerating applied AI in Sweden? We don't know, because we don't know what would happen if we wouldn't exist. So that's, first of all, very tricky. But we see concrete examples of things happening that wouldn't happen otherwise. But we have a partnership model. And that is basically because we want to see real commitment from the organizations working with us. So they pay to be partners. And that is really key, because then we at least have some...
And who is partners? Who is partners?
That is everything from small... we have a lot of big companies, Swedish companies. We have some international companies with... they have also a site in Sweden. We have SMEs and startups, consultancy firms, public sector, different authorities and other organizations, regions, academia.
For you, of course, showing commitment, and they have stake in it, so to speak. What are they paying for? What do they get for it?
Why should someone become a partner of AI Sweden?
I think, mostly because you get this network, you get this platform, and we can really catalyze projects and initiatives, and we can be the platform for that projects and initiatives to happen. I think the Edge Lab is a great example of some automotive companies in Gothenburg and hardware providers said that we need a lab to test federated learning and edge learning. And we don't really have time to wait for some funding and setting this up, but we just put in the hardware, and can you be a facilitator and can you host this? We said yes, of course. And then we put in some effort and people in it as well. We applied for some funding, but most of the things that is happening is driven by partners saying, you will be a good host for this because we need someone be in the middle and be the coordinator and
be the middleman to speak about against blockchains. But I just had a blockchain discussion previous to this. So in this case, we actually want to be the middleman, right? Yeah.
Cool. So I think that is what can happen, and you can, because it's hard for a company to say that we can have the Edge Lab. Okay, but can everyone come there and can? So that is a great example, and then also. From what I do a lot is to talk to a lot of different partners and try to find the common challenges and understand that you're talking about the same thing but you're using different language. And we can probably do something together here. We can set up an initiative, or we can set up a program or a project and apply for funding. And so we really try to make things happen, I would say. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We have one leg at AI Sweden that is more focused on AI transformation and get everyone to take steps on AI maturity level, all partners, and support them in different ways with networks and education and things like that. And then we have the other leg that is my main focus, that is more of our applied projects and also applied research, and try to, because we really want to build an interesting environment, that it should be interesting to. You can work at a partner, but you can also spend some time working on interesting problems and questions at AI Sweden. So I think that we can really... I was reading the State of AI report earlier, and there you see a lot of community-driven efforts in research, mostly for large-scale models, and academia is almost doing nothing in that case, and it's completely driven by either companies or community-driven initiatives. And I think we can be something in the middle, that we are not a company, and we're not just a community. They are super impressive, but we are something in between, and I think that could be really beneficial, and we can find interesting problems, and people can still be employed at Volvo or Scania or a startup, but they can work on this problem together at AI Sweden. So trying to build this kind of interesting environment for applied research.
And are you referring to these communities very much part of the whole open source era, open source approaches to how we tackle this? Is this linked, or is it the same, or how would you describe these communities that are sort of coming together to do great stuff now? Which ones are we talking about here?
I'm thinking of Luther AI, for example, and Lion and others building large-scale models in a community-driven way. Yeah, the big science project. That is doing things differently, and I think as a reaction also to things happening in a closed environment at DeepMind and OpenAI, for example. So some kind of, okay, we can also do this, but in a community-driven way.
How can you really understand the difference, though? I mean, you can see DeepMind and OpenAI and these kind of initiatives, and they are trying to accelerate AI, or even try like artificial general intelligence, as DeepMind and OpenAI is, but I guess that's at least not something AI Sweden is doing.
Yeah.
And then also, how does it compare to like RISE or a university or a company? What is really the thing that differentiates AI Sweden from research institutes, universities, or a company like Volvo or whatnot?
I think if we start comparing to research institutes, I think one difference is the broad, the broad mission. That is it's not research focused at all. I think research is something that is happening because we want to apply. And it is also I would say, partner that we are built. We are our partners. I would really include the partners in the organization as well. Like that's AI Sweden. We're nothing without the partners. And what we do should be to the benefit of Sweden and the partners. So I think that is one difference. Then we have a lot of similarities, I would say, and we work a lot with RISE and academia and others. And then, of course, we're not the companies. We're not non-for-profit. That's the main difference from being a company, I would say.
But maybe one way to educate the listeners or educate ourselves here today is maybe to explore a little bit the ecosystem here, like the different actors we are talking about, so we can understand what type of actor is AI Sweden and what is this orchestration or collaboration facilitation role versus actors of academia, actors of RISE. So could we in a simple way try to just pinpoint, we say partners, right? But when you look at it, it's a university, it's a research institute, it's a large corporation, it's a AI tech startup. So could we just try to make that map a little bit more clear together? I'm trying to figure this out, actually.
Yeah.
I can start, and I'm going to paraphrase Daniel Gillblad a bit as well, but I think you actually started speaking about this in a good way when we just opened here, which is that there is a problem today in how we use AI. And the problem is, potentially one of the problems at least, is that everyone is doing things from scratch. And you spoke about healthcare and different regions and hospitals, and they all have very similar challenges and opportunities to use data and AI, but they don't collaborate and they don't even know potentially about what the others are doing. And as Daniel said then, when he was here, he basically said, we are too small to do it ourselves. I think it's such a profound statement, I think. It's a single region, a single hospital is too small to build up a proper AI solution for all of healthcare or even a single application. But if they start to talk to others, do knowledge sharing, as you spoke about, just letting people know that they actually are doing something similar. Perhaps they can just share the knowledge and that's good enough, or they can actually start to collaborate directly. Sharing data is probably hard because it's so sensitive, and I think that doesn't only apply to healthcare, I would say. Even like whatever company you have,
Yes.
Data is so sensitive, it's a competitive advantage. So I think it's a general problem that you can't really share data. But there are other ways of collaborating and other ways to build AI systems. And finding these levels of collaborations, I think, is a core. If AI Sweden could do that, that would be a really beneficial thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And that I would say that is really what we're trying to do in both like small steps. What can we do here and now, and also have the big picture and try to have that goal. And healthcare is a great example. But also other, like we're talking about MLOps, for example. That is something all companies and organizations at some point will face the same challenges. Why shouldn't we work together on that kind? Because it's not the core business of, like, trying to find these horizontal, interesting topics that we can really collaborate on, because that's not your core business. It's just something that needs to work. It's something that you need to have in place. And it could be data management, like you can share, instead of sharing data, share knowledge around how to handle your data and work together to solve these challenges. So,
but how does that vision relate to a partner model where someone needs to pay to be part of the partnership and everybody else who is not paying has no access to what you're describing?
I think you have access to a lot of things still, not maybe the concrete projects and what we do inside, but knowledge sharing and seminars are often open, for example, and some of the networking part. But then still I think that it's not a big partner fee, and if you really want to do things, I think we also need to have the commitment. So and we need to have a way of existing, like a funding. So yeah, but of course we're trying to share as open as possible, also outside.
Because the argument or the thinking I have, we open up and talked about these other communities, and maybe the most powerful communities are right now is the open source communities in different kinds, and that you find in whatever TensorFlow, or if you go hardcore, right? And here the mechanisms are truly different, right? So we are starting an open source project with an open source license, and then we can contribute and we can work with it, but we're creating something which is fundamentally structured to get feet, to go viral. And to me that is very appealing, and I think it fits well with a investment that comes from the government and stuff like that. And we are not so used to it maybe always in business. I'm just observing from the sidelines that the fundamental power of open source and how it's really exploding in the tech communities, or the people with the know-how, so to speak. No one builds an algorithm from scratch today. You go to TensorFlow and then you can go all the way. MLOps, well, you learn MLOps in GitLab and GitHub in these open repositories, etc., etc. So isn't it the very core, isn't a lot in these mechanisms we need to sort of figure out and learn about? I think this is part of the understanding of how open source works.
I wouldn't, open source is one thing, but then learning best practices on how to do things, I would say potentially is different.
Why?
Well, it's. I would really love to show my little. I think I did this when I worked for AI Sweden and tried to build up a graph of what is necessary to have like a proper working AI implementation in some kind of system. And it's not sufficient to have a model. It's not sufficient to have the code. It's not sufficient to have the data. It's not sufficient to have the legal challenges or compliance in place. It's not sufficient to put something in production. It's not sufficient to just do, the culture change and the alignment necessary in the business to do it. You need to do all of it. Open source gives one part, the code, but it's so much more besides that's necessary to have a successful implementation, I would argue.
So let me be super clear now, because in some ways you're misunderstanding what I meant with open source. So the practice of
I think
dealing with code, as we have learned to open source, what is stopping us to have those fundamental collaborative approaches and licensing for a best set of practices? When do you stop talking about?
How do you write down in open source what the best practice is? I think actually AI Sweden is doing partly with My.AI.se one of that work. I think that is starting to try to find a way to just catalog or find some kind of set of example project.
Building the use case library.
Exactly.
And we've been talking about that for so long, and finally it's happening.
Yes.
But I think this is a super good example of what I would then call open source thinking applied to practices and inspiration, right? So, and I think that is a brilliant lighthouse example for what I'm trying to say.
And that is also open for everyone. So My.AI and the use case library is open for everyone. And I think that is the key learnings that partners have working together and under the umbrella of AI Sweden is around the leadership, around how to get the right data, how to structure a project, how to find good use cases, because then they suddenly have someone to discuss with. Because I think what is often happening, and I guess that you also see that in your work, is that it's usually a couple of people that are kind of alone in their organizations trying to really push this forward, and sometimes they need each other and need to do projects outside to learn from each other. And
I get what you mean partly. I think at least, Henrik, and just increasing collaboration is something that we need to do.
And what's what's the monetizing model? What's the operating model that makes that work? And that leads all the way back to, I was trying to talk about patterns and anti-patterns for organizations. So if we truly believe collaboration is fundamental to succeed and survive, how is that described in the organizational setup? How is that described in your job description? How is that described in your KPIs? What patterns do you actually have that supports collaboration? Or do we really think the change will happen, that I have a job description and an organizational chart that looks like this, and this is my KPIs, and then I'm supposed to do collaboration in my spare time? So this is what I mean, that we have a pattern that is sort of Tayloristic in this way, and there is no description of collaboration. I don't have any time for that. And by the way, they cut my budget last year, so I have no staff either, and now I'm supposed to collaborate. So if we don't change the pattern of how we organize and what we value and what metrics we have, how can it happen, in my opinion?
And I think we try to do this also by showing examples. So the more you engage and the more you put people in projects and do concrete things, the more is happening. But at
some point they can't do it in their spare time. So at some point we did this, we learned this, now we need to take it to the next level of management. And how do you now need to change the organizational role description or something like this?
I think one way to describe AI Sweden, at least I just thought of this right now, but it's probably not a good thing, but it's like a product owner of Sweden.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that actually.
I like that.
We have a backlog. We have epics. We have some features.
We need someone to speak about, what are the needs.
Yep.
We need to have some people working with it and trying to make, match the producers to the consumers. We need to prioritize a bit, how we can get that working properly. I don't know, perhaps some way at least. But because no one, not a single company, not a single university have the full overview of what other people are doing, and this is really the task of a product owner in some sense, to get an understanding of what are the needs and what other people are doing.
But what I don't get is that if we are a collaborator, and I'm going back to the actors in this, we don't have the actors within such a community is asymmetrical. So we have different types of actors with different agendas why they're in AI Sweden. So if I take an example of the consultancy, they want to lead generate and want to find business there. If I take someone who is very strong on technical IP, or maybe even has solved MLOps practices. So because we have an asymmetrical partnership, I don't understand how we can have the same fundamental partner model for everyone. I mean, if I take the example, should I pay if I have the IP that I should give to host here? Shouldn't I be paid? So this actor map is really important. I think
what is done inside AI Sweden is everything should be open. So it's nothing that is IP that is shareable knowledge and open. So that is, and you don't do business inside AI Sweden. You do your business outside. So that is key. And it is working. I would say that the partner model is working, and we find the most interesting projects is when we find common challenges at the space agency or ESA and the automotive industry and healthcare, and maybe a startup has part of the solution and want to work together with these actors on edge learning, for example. And that is working, but it requires a lot of translation.
I'd like to come back to the point of everything being open, but we'll take that later.
Yeah. But this is a super good example, right? So how does it, because maybe this is very good to educate, I think, me and also the listeners. How does this work then? Because you have a space agency, which is maybe public sector. You have a automotive industry, private sector. You have AI Sweden as a facilitator, orchestrator, and you have a very small startup that has part of the solution but no money. So how, I understand the value of contributing, but how does that work commercially? If I'm a small startup, I don't have any time, and I can't do business inside here. So how does it work?
I would say that some actually do it as in kind because of learning and building things together. In some cases, we have the Vinnova funding and we apply together for funding. Normally, it's not enough, but it's still something to get the funding to do something. And we've been part of several projects together. And
but that's a key learning and education. Then that you come up to that with a good project idea, and now we have different actors, and we apply for funding in different ways, and we can help each other.
And sometimes it's interesting enough for everyone to do it anyhow.
So both exist.
Both exist.
Okay.
But it is a learning curve. I think people are so scared about sharing knowledge, scared about can I speak about this to someone? Imagine if some competitor steals my idea. But I think people are getting increasingly open.
And I will also bring up I think an increasingly amount of organizations understand that we need to have an interesting environment in Sweden. And it doesn't matter if it's inside a company or if it's broader, but they need it for talent attraction, and they need to be able to show, for AstraZeneca, for example, or Volvo or others, they need to show that it's relevant to be in Sweden, and it's relevant to have R&D in Sweden. It's relevant to do AI here because we have a broader community. We're working with these interesting projects. We have some cutting edge projects. We do. So I would say that the more AI mature organizations we work with understand the broader perspective and how important it is to make Sweden interesting, and Sweden an interesting place for talent, and that, okay, so if you can attract one person, then that person stays in the ecosystem and in Sweden, and then maybe come back in a couple of years and move to another company. That really benefits the ecosystem, and I think an increasingly number of organizations understand that. And to build this kind of interesting environment, I believe that we need to work on this kind of cutting edge projects. And my idea is that could be outside what you do normally, but if you could spend some of your time working with healthcare, for example, if you're in a company, maybe that can make us retain that person a little longer, because you can work with something else as well. You can still work at your company, but you can also do something else. And I believe that will happen, because we need to make sure that it's interesting to be here, and you can work on interesting projects and with interesting people.
But how do we or how do AI Sweden define the key problems to address, or the key issues we need to solve, as a way to fly into how do we need to invest our efforts, our resources, our money in this? How have we defined the key problem areas or working areas?
So I think Daniel talked a bit about it when he was in the podcast, because it's a lot of his work, and of course it's both listening, but it's also telling others what to do, or what is important. So we need to do both. We need to understand, but we also need to be a bit proactive and say that this will be important. I think federated learning was one example. We started to push that to a lot of organizations at the same time, listening to their problems. Okay, but maybe doing this in a decentralized way could solve this problem. And we have other examples as well. So I would say that having the overall vision of operationalizing, that's a super hard word.
Yeah.
I always stumble on that. But I think that is to have that and then try to find the common areas that and then we have this kind of areas, strategically important areas. For example, language is one, Swedish language. We have decentralized AI, federated learning. We have MLOps as something that is not really started, but we're starting to talk about partners about it. And then when we find the interest and the commitment, then we start, and then we formulate projects and things like that. So it's very much both listening and understanding what the challenges are, having some topics in mind, talking about them, and then when the timing is right, starting projects. And I think our strength is that we have the speed, so we can start things very quickly. And that is also a benefit from having the partner network, that we know the partners, we know the challenges, and we have the right collaborators when we are ready to start a project. So we can be very quick in that, and I think that is a strength.
But if we zoom out and ask the same question on an even more macro strategic level, what are the key things stopping us from becoming the most best society or country in the world to use AI? I mean, like, you could zoom out to say, okay, somewhere here is a fundamental talent problem or reskilling problem. So basically the way we have organized, like the critical mass of people that knows this stuff on all levels is not enough. So it's a talent, this is one way. Another fundamental problem we are talking about is collaboration, or fundamental, the way we have driven our organizations in our own silos with one functional domain know-how at a time. A third one could be we fundamentally don't have the common lingo. We need translators. We say, okay, do we need translators, or do we need to come up with a new language or new way of understanding each other, how business and tech relate? I mean, so what are the macro sort of strategic main things that we can sort of see that we need to sort of, if we start directing on the highest level investments?
Well, in short, basically, how can Sweden become a top country for applied AI, right?
And what are the things we need to put our
and I think, first of all, we should also question why do we always want to be the best or the leading?
Yes.
And
Thank
do
you
we
very much,
really
Johanna.
benefit from us being the best? We want it's nothing wrong with anyone to be
but we
as
can
good.
improve, at least.
We can improve, definitely. But I think that is something we should
annoying.
be best.
Every country should be best some. Yeah,
why?
it's very annoying.
Why?
Yes, very well said.
But I think of course, legal challenges. They are regarding data, regarding and things like that. The overall competence, knowledge, understanding, leadership on all levels, I would say, leadership in organizations at national level, politicians, the understanding that it is a democracy question, actually. It's about democracy, it's about what is happening if we don't do this and we rely on a few companies globally or countries, and what does that happen? Because I think often we're talking about things and we talk about ethics. Okay, that's good, and of course we should be responsible in a way of applying a new technology, but I think often we come in from the wrong direction when having more strategic discussions and with politicians and top level management and things like that. So I think that's where we need to start, both in companies and at the national level, to work on the leadership and understanding, and then of course start doing and make things happen.
I like that. Commit to deploy, or actually start doing and really working on it is actually the best advice, because I think not until you get your hands dirty do you really start understanding what this topic is all about.
It is easy to keep talking about things. That is easy because you don't have to do anything. You can keep talking, and it's also easy to say that we need good examples, we need use cases, proof of concept. Yeah, okay, but we have kind of we have good examples now, and we know that it's important. We need to build at scale, and we need to build the infrastructure. We're not just single projects or proof of concepts. We need to make sure that we have a working infrastructure for AI in Sweden.
So what does that mean? Can you elaborate more? What does an infrastructure for Sweden mean?
But I think both on the data side, of course, like when we talk about public sector and others, and I don't say that all data should be open, because that is... Yes, and we should not focus on that. I think that is one mistake that we often do, is to talk about open data as something good. We should work with interesting data and important data. Yeah. And be really good at that. And we need to, of course, connect that to the right infrastructure for computations and things like that. But I also see the infrastructure in sharing models, sharing knowledge, sharing. It's like have this collaborative structure. So not just the technical infrastructure, but also have this leadership and collaborative structures that makes it happen.
But this is a rabbit hole, Anders. Let's go talk about the infrastructure for Sweden, because I think it's very dangerous to talk about it in that way if we don't understand that, to share data, to have platforms to do that. Yes, you need to have some infrastructure technology to run stuff off, but the real point is what's the patterns, how you have organized it, how you built it, what is your practices. So now we come into we talk about data ops, ML ops, and different architectural patterns. Are we building one central monolith for all of Sweden, or do we build a distributed domain-driven system? What are we doing here? So talk about infrastructure is important, but I think it's really tricky that people think, this is used in another tech project, which is very, very... A platform is not, for me, the tech, is how you operate it. And
I think it's very similar to the discussions you have with healthcare and the regions. It's very easy to think that one system, we should have one system for all regions and healthcare and hospitals in Sweden. It's very easy to think about that when you say that you need to collaborate and we need to work. But no, that's not. We need to know how to work with the system and how to make how.
This is. I mean, you can go as far as way. So, choosing if the vendor is blue or red is completely meaningless, because it's more about how you operationalize this. I would argue. So. If you're not careful now, we are solving the wrong problem, and we become a massive hunt for the blue company wants to win this massive infrastructure deal. We are talking about we need a common infrastructure. It becomes a technology problem when this is a fundamental practice problem.
And I think at the very simple level, it is about understanding what we already have. And make sure that we make the best use of, if we talk about research infrastructure, for example, that we have Berzelius, we have, now we're talking about the technical infrastructure again, but we have these different infrastructures, but we need to make sure that it's easy to use, that it's, you can use this one for this purpose, you can use this one together with this data, and you can use, building the map and understanding. I don't see one solution, and that would be...
And Berzelius, I think, is another interesting topic. I add that to the list, so we can speak more about that shortly. But just to try to close off the topic as well and think more about how Sweden can be a top or improve our ability to use applied AI. You mentioned basically leadership is one, trying to have the proper understanding of the possibilities, I guess, both in political level, but also in companies. And then, of course, having the technical infrastructure, as we spoke about, but then also, I think what you mean, Henrik, is having... How should we phrase it in a good way? I mean, practices is one, of course, but I think in short, if we simply can share the knowledge and understand what people are doing and stop redoing things ourselves time and time again, that would be an insane benefit. Isn't that more or less what we want to avoid? The more we can, perhaps the answer to the question is simply, the more we can reduce the time every company redo what another company already did, but they didn't know about it, that is a big win.
Yes. Right? Yeah, definitely.
But because very fast now, let's take examples on this infrastructure topic, and maybe as a way to exemplify it. Of course, this exists in any large organization. if I go to, I worked at Vattenfall and I will now work at Scania. The problem is not so much, that we need to decide to, if I think Vattenfall is a good example, like we have nuclear over here, we have wind parks over here, we have networks over there, and we have retail over here. Okay, we need one common infrastructure. Of course, we can't have it like that, but then we can decide upon design patterns, how we fundamentally, going to utilize cloud. We can build templates, and we can do things that makes something reusable. So this is very much more. You can go in nerd and call it infrastructure as code. You can all the things that creates a production system that is really scalable and all that. It's so much more, that goes on code level that is very, very intertwined with practices of how you build stuff. And I think this misconception, I think is quite important to get right. I think when you build something successful in Spotify, it's just not to say, we went to GCP. Okay, fine, whatever. How did Spotify utilize GCP? How did they organize it, architecture it? What was their fundamental strategy? And how could we have a common strategy on how we use this technology that suits this? I think, so I'm thinking that drives a different agenda on what to collaborate on and where to put standards and how we work. Then it can maybe we can reuse things, we can make it more interoperable. So I don't know. I think it's a dangerous conversation because you end up in a replatforming investment from hell that doesn't solve anything. If you're not careful, you build the same shit with another label on it.
No, and I think a big part of this is building the collaborative structures. How to collaborate, how to work on common challenges. How can we have, and that could be anything from having the right legal agreements to have a code of conduct, and how are we interacting with each other, and like it's much more of that kind of structure that I think
is needed.
Because we cannot get stuck in one technical solution. That will change.
For sure.
It would be so, but we need to find ways of have this national collaborations, I think.
I hope that you actually do get an even bigger platform. I think we should move into what Gordon has put up here, which is the My.AI.se thingy. But if you get actually a legal use case library for how people who work with GDPR and upcoming AI Act and whatnot, I think people would pay a huge amount of money to just get access to that. And it's such a big problem, I would argue, today.
It is.
Is that something you're thinking about as well? Or?
Yes, yes, definitely. And also how to work very integrated with legal experts and others. It's challenging, and no one really wants to say how they solve it because you're afraid of...
Yes, exactly.
But I think here maybe we can work in... I think finding some more closed, like all regional legal experts or working with healthcare at hospitals, for example, they could maybe collaborate with each other, and we can find, but sharing things openly.
It's really tough.
But I really want that to happen because we will save so much money because so many projects stops at legal challenges, and I think it's unnecessary because I think if we just had the same understanding and we got really proactive legal experts working together with the technical experts and management and others to really solve the problems, that will... but we see so many projects and things stopping at the legal question, so definitely.
Maybe we should, as a segue into My.AI, let's start with the My.AI. So here we have now we are starting to build up different types of, how should I call it, tools or things that helps Sweden and their members, to accelerate or to become better. And here we have a very concrete example, My.AI.se. Could you elaborate a little bit about what that is all about and what you can find there and how that came about?
So everything that you see the viewers will also see in their
that's
in the
great.
screen, so you can guide us through basically how it's built and what can people find and etc.
Oh, that's really good.
Right.
And I don't have my glasses, so I will. But it will work. Yes, but this is really something that had grown from a lot of different needs, I would say, from the ecosystem. I think the use case library is a great example of that we've been talking so much about how can we gather really good examples of AI projects on different levels, different organizations, for different purposes, and have that in one place to show as inspiration or as knowledge sharing, and you can get contact details and things like that. So I would say that the use case library is really one core here, but it's also to share other resources, and that could be something interesting you read, like uploading a document that is okay. This paper is really interesting, or this presentation was really good, and things like that. So it's really community driven. It's open for everyone. We are pushing our partners, of course, to upload a lot, but also others. You can post challenges. So if you have a challenge, or you have data and you want to invite others to work on that challenge, you can post that.
So like competitions as well, or challenges?
That could be competitions and challenges and things like that. And you can have like a presentation of your organization. So that everyone can, okay, I'm looking for an organization that can solve this problem. Okay, maybe I can find them here, and you can search for others. I think really interesting things is happening. That we have one example of one of our researchers that saw that one partner has uploaded a paper that he was really interested in, and then they started talking to each other, and that resulted in a project. And that is super simple. Like you saw that someone has the same interest and uploaded something, and then
building the community and being an enabler in people finding each other.
And we've done the same with, for example, master thesis projects. You can post them here, and we have them in one place. We are working on a job board for partners where you can put up AI jobs, and you can do that here as well. So it's really community driven, and
I think the job board, and recruitment in general is one of the things that I think most people are asking for, because everyone is lacking AI talents.
Yes.
And if you can find a way to make people understand, you can come to us to work with AI, that could be a really, I think, beneficial function of the. What do you call it? My.AI?
I call it My.AI, but it's hard to say. That's also My.AI.
My.AI.se.
My.AI.se.
I think that's that.
But I would really encourage everyone to make an account and put up use cases. I think the use case library is growing, and it's really good. And also events. It's a way of sharing events and other things. And then what's really interesting here is that we can also tailor this as we want. So if you find a way of, okay, this could be better, this could be improved, just let us know, and then we can tailor and probably set something up.
I have a question.
Just one thing. So congratulations, because it's a very, very big improvement since the last time we have actually shown this to our viewers.
Yeah, that's
it was the beginning, I believe, when we showed it like last year or something. So congratulations.
Yeah, really awesome.
And we also want to put an AI layer on this, of course, with recommendations, and you should get connections, and that is on the way. So
awesome.
And that is also then we work with partners. So we have partners working on that kind of challenges, and they are working with us
to
help.
Would you put that up as a use case as well?
Would be some kind of meta level, but yes, we can definitely do that.
Use case for how to use AI for use cases.
Yes.
Awesome.
But I have a question. Over the years now, you have collaborated with a lot of partners, and the partnership has grown. Could you share some lessons learned in relation to what are companies struggling with, or what are your sort of, based on now some sort of empirical accumulated evidence, you are saying it's the same damn challenges coming up and you're reinventing the wheel. What is it that the community is sort of working on, struggling with, or what have you sort of seen that you said, look, if you're going to start your AI journey, this is what I can really see as a pattern of what problems people have or what they need to focus on?
I think it's a lot of things, and I will probably forget some of them. I think on an overall level, it is that you can't expect collaboration to just happen. You need to push, and you need to poke at organizations and say, you should talk to this one, you should do this. So that is on a beta level. That.
What do you mean, inside the companies, or what do you mean?
It can actually be inside the companies as well. It's very often that we connect people inside the same company.
Yeah.
It's a bit scary.
And why do we need to collaborate? I mean, obviously, but maybe so we can spell it out, we need to have tech people and business domain knowledgeable people working together.
Yeah, of course. I would say that, of course, data and data quality, access to data, both inside a company and an organization and outside and sharing with others.
So the whole operating model, practices, technology stack, to have the data of the right quality in order to do anything.
Because I think
topic.
Starting a lot of collaborative projects and smaller projects that we've done, it's very easy for someone to say that we have a lot of data, we have really good data. And then when you start working with the projects,
not for this purpose.
You don't even know if the data is accessible inside the company or if it's of good quality as well. So that is one. The leadership, of course, that you need to have commitment from above, I would say.
But how does that work when they don't sometimes not even really understand what they're committing to be really a bit blunt?
I think be patient and describe and find the way to explain it to that person.
Yes.
And
So a key topic here is actually how pedagogical, how can you now take a very techy topic and make sure that your CEO still can follow and can be committed and understand for his purpose.
Yeah. And I think the learnings from most of the projects, if you have committed leaders in the organization, then the projects run very smoothly, often. So that's really good. And to help the organization to actually describe this and to describe the value and the so that is important, I think. And it is, you need to understand what language how to talk to different people and how can you engage different people. It's a lot about the engaging and get the attention and interest and see the value. So, but then of course a lot of common technical challenges as well that they're facing, and then we try to set up this kind of projects as well. But I would say leadership and data have been the main topics so far.
But and how we talked about this before, like the translator role, or how challenging do you see it that people are sort of really exploring also the fundamental ways of working? So how do we drive a project now where we have so many different facets that we need to structure? We need to get the data quality right, we need to get the infrastructure right, we need to get the algorithm right, we need to get the domain. So how much is also about finding their feet in their sort of project ways of working and just finding efficiency in in the operational collaboration, doing your agile sprint or whatever you want to call it. How much challenge do you see here? Or people are getting starting and learning by doing, or how does it work?
Yeah, but I think one problem is that you see it as proof of concepts or smaller projects, and you will try to do something somewhere in the organization, and then it gets stuck there. It's and it will not be operationalized.
The prototype graveyard.
Yes, and I think we are beyond that. So we have had a lot of examples and a lot of prototypes, and we need to do things build the fundamentals and really do things now. And then you need commitment from the organization. So it's easier to start a small project somewhere, but we need to do this kind of...
I think that one of the core problems as well, I mean, you said it very well, I think, it's the data, you need to have the proper data in place, you have the leadership in place, the technical challenges, the legal, as you said before. But I think one thing that I've seen so many times make company fail is that they think that just having a prototype in place is enough. and they don't recognize that the problem are actually putting something in production. And they think, well, it's done now, and they just have a separate data scientist or scientist team doing something, but they can't really put that into a product, and that whole disconnect or misunderstanding about what it really takes to build something that puts value to the company. It seems to be such a common misconception. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. But also that we see now that it is happening, and I think that is a big difference from if I compare now to just 1 or 2 years ago.
Good.
It is really happening. I was talking to one of the hospitals last week, and they said that we are going to put our first model in production. We don't know how to do it yet, but we need to do it, and we are going to do it. But we need to find a way of organizing ourselves and around this, and this will be new challenges because they set up an internal AI center. They worked on the models, developed models, and now they're putting the first model in production. I think that is amazing to hear because.
Or going to, or perhaps in the future, or what's?
But they're going into the phase now of putting it in production. That is the goal.
Very great. Yeah, it's great.
And I'm happy to hear that because it's something different from showing that it's possible or doing a project. And I think that is happening in a lot of different organizations now, that you're actually starting to really put things in production. Still many challenges, but I see a big difference now compared to just 1 or 2 years ago, I think. I don't know if you agree, but that's...
Yeah. It is improving. I think, still, I think it's a lot of learnings in necessary. People still, I think, are saying, I just put a thesis student on it, and they spend 6 months trying to do something. And if you think that will work and bring value to the company, you're very mistaken, I would say.
But maybe to exemplify this conversation, which is, if you're in deep into this, you know what we're talking about. If you come from a traditional company, who is sort of a clear separation between IT and business, we run our business processes, and then we go to IT for a project. And then we go to IT for a project. They build something that is very clear, like a business application. They install it, they set it up, they train the users, and then the project is gone. The sort of the maintenance is on a system level, but we are sort of on our own, and we just live in our systems, and we don't really change our economy systems that often. When we now go into this world where you have a model in production, you are living in a different world. I mean, like if you're in Spotify, you know all about this because you're a tech company. You live with DevOps, right? So you live with, you develop and maintain, and the business and the tech is more or less the same. So here is a very big misconception. POC, yes, it's a small project. Okay, now we need to do a big project. Not even that is correct. You need to understand that you're in for life. This is line all the way through. There is no sort of, we do projects and initiatives, but not like in the same way as we are used to. So I think there's a huge misconception in, if you're not, haven't experienced this like it at the more tech platform company, that you're sort of this IT supply demand, we develop and we have project spend and we have run spend. We talk about these topics. I think this is really tricky to understand in public sector for a municipality or it's very different, right? Their operating model in tech is not structured in this way.
No, definitely.
Would you? Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to think a little bit now around a couple of more topics that takes us. Or do you want to go somewhere?
I just think it's worth mentioning. You got a big honor, I think, as well, with a very
we haven't talked about
prestigious
that.
announcement.
Let's take that now.
Yeah. So you got nominated, or you got the, how do you phrase it? You were in Forbes magazine, right?
Yeah, on the 30 under 30 list for Europe. Yeah.
How did that happen? That's really impressive, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. You get nominated.
Yeah.
And then you get to answer a lot of, if you go through that phase, you need to answer a lot of questions. And they do a lot of background check that you actually have done what you say you have done. And then if you're lucky, you're or maybe not lucky, but if you're on the list. So they have so it's a yearly list. They have.
There's 30 people under 30 years old.
And they have different lists. So this is for science and healthcare, and they have for finance, I think. A couple of different lists. And then I think the main thing is that you get invited to this community of super talented people all over the world. And you get invited to summits and also just having the Slack channel with everyone is, of course.
Cool.
So, yeah.
What do you think were the things that sort of stood out, that sort of they thought, oh, this is super interesting, or what you've been working on?
It's hard to say, but I think when I was at a summit in Israel this spring to meet others, and I realized that I've done similar things as because it's a lot of startup founders. That's the main. That's almost everyone, and just I've done a lot of similar things, but it's still not a startup in that sense. It's some kind of a governmental initiative on AI, building a research and applied AI initiative. So that really stands out, I think, because it's normally, I think, these kind of initiatives comes from a university or something else. So this is something different and no one really heard about. And also, of course, doing it, it's the first thing I do, basically. So that, of course, yeah.
Fantastic. And so that opened up the door for you to join some sort of meetups. Could you elaborate? You had something in Israel right now.
I think Forbes are really good at building a community around this. That's a lot of branding.
Smart.
But it's also a real community, and you feel that you have the support, and you can reach out to anyone and get answers if you have questions about something, and meet up people if you're traveling. And
so you met some new friends. You made new friends,
yeah,
new relationships.
Definitely. And it's also, of course, I think internationally a stamp too, because it's recognized all over the world.
Yeah, it fits well on the resume.
Yeah, but it's really a real value on the network as well. So
fantastic.
And also, I would say for us as an organization, actually got some comment of people when we were recruiting that, this was really one thing that made me apply. So maybe also showing that you can have a career path in this kind of organization that is not a startup or not a big corporate organization. It's not that common, I think, that you can have this kind of and I hope that can be inspiring, like for others to do this kind of things as well. So
super cool. I would like to take a last question to sort of sum up or sort of end the chapter in this pod talking about AI Sweden and move then later into a little bit more general or philosophical or deeper, broader topics. But the last question to sort of sum this up is sort of what's the trajectory here? What's the sort of ambition, goals? What's in the pipeline? Where is AI Sweden heading in the next years? What's your roadmap here?
Yes, that's a really good question. And I would say that we are past the establishment phase. That just happened, I would say. That now we're established, we exist, we are a critical mass of people, we have a critical mass of partners. So now it's a lot of executing on this. And I think it's really interesting that we have these two tracks. One is very broad, getting a lot of organizations taking steps on the AI maturity, having the My.AI community, building big things, but then also have our more focused, cutting-edge projects. And I think doing both is challenging and interesting at the same time, because we need to do the cutting-edge, more research-focused things to stay relevant for a certain type of partners and for getting, like we talked about earlier, Sweden being interesting for talent. And then we need to do this big effort in helping and supporting and help organizations helping each other to take steps on an AI maturity, because more and more organizations understand that the ecosystem is important, and you will benefit from more organizations to actually be AI ready. And so working on those two tracks, I would say, of course, we are project funded and funded by governmental initiatives.
Will you go break even soon, you think?
No, but we need to find a way of have a sustainable funding for AI, applied AI in Sweden. We need this kind of efforts, and we need to find a way of have a substantial funding, I would say. Right now it's a lot of patchwork, and I think that's how Sweden work. When you're doing this kind of project and research things, it's a lot of patchwork. You need to find projects here, you need to find an initiative here, you need to find some funding from partners here, and I think it's a good thing to some extent, because you need to prioritize, and that's also what we need to do, because we are very broad. And we need to see what is working, what is not working, what should we focus on, and we need to do that because we have this patchwork of funding too. So it's also a positive thing. But I think that is what is happening. And then out and do concrete projects at a lot of different companies, accelerating applied AI in healthcare, finding interesting challenges that we can collaborate on. So a lot of like executing on what we started and have established.
And if I just look into 2023, where do you want to do more in comparison to what you do today, that you have already pinpointed that we're going to do this, we haven't done that, or we need to really step up here in this area? What is your sort of focus that this we need to push now?
I think if we talk about technology and like tech areas, I would say MLOps is one. I would say supply chain optimization, scheduling.
So, and here is like from the community we see this.
Yeah, and I think the community is ready for that.
Yeah.
I think that is.
And if we move out of tech and into organization,
yes, then I think it's. Of course, continue the leadership education on all levels, on national level, politicians, leaders in organizations. But I also hope to see a lot of interactions starting to happen between organizations without us being directly involved. Like we building this kind of environment where you start working together. What was your question about 2023? What is not have talent, of course, also. Talent. I would say we have started some talent programs with the only purpose that we should have talents a short time at AI Sweden and working with projects, and then they're out to partners and get hired by the community and ecosystem. And I think that is something that we really want to scale, and we think that is what will make a big difference, because we need to have the competence out. And I think it's a very good way for the talents in this talent programs. We have a couple of different talent programs, everything from high school, right from high school to PhDs. But that they have AI Sweden as a platform, and then they work with partners, and then they can get hired, is that we also make sure that they have this connection and that they can collaborate with each other, even if they are split into different organizations, and also that they have the connection to AI Sweden and want to work with projects together. And so that is something I think we should definitely do a lot more of, because that will make a real impact.
Do you think there will be more work with EU funding, or for these kind of digital innovation hubs and etc.?
We need to work with EU funding as well. Of course, it's a bit challenging, of course, and it takes time. But it's worth spending on the right things. I think healthcare is one thing. I think we have this. What is it called? Health data spaces coming in the EU now. We need to follow that. We need to understand what that is and how we can get involved in that.
Because that is a good question, actually, leading into sort of, okay, we have an actor system. We didn't really nail it down. I would like to do that better in Sweden, and then we have a Nordic context, and then we have a European context, and then we have a global context.
Yes.
So how does this fit in? Okay, regulation, but also communities. If we take a broader look at the ecosystem or a community here, what's AI Sweden thinking there, I guess?
So internationally, of course, we're working a bit with Norway. We have had some interactions with Finland and so on, but we have our main international collaborators are Canada. We're working with Applied AI in Germany. That is an organization that is kind of similar to us, I would say. And they have this really interesting AI maturity assessment tool and things that we have adopted into what we do. But I see that we should definitely work even more in the Nordics. Of course, it's if we talk about language, for example, we have very similar languages, apart from Finnish, maybe, but and also when it comes to healthcare, for example, and other things, and so definitely, and we have connections to Nora in Norway that is kind of similar to us, but we haven't got these really concrete things happening yet. I would say.
Very good. Do you want to take a topic? Otherwise, I have a topic which is also from Johanna, but I think we can take your topic first.
I'm so eager to go to more technical topics.
Let's take a technical topic in between. I think that fits perfect.
So, of course, we spoke about Berzelius, and one of the core projects that we're working with, of course, or that you are working with at AI Sweden is NLP and NLU, I think you call it more. Perhaps you can speak more about this GPT project.
Yeah, definitely. So, and this is also a really good example of when we are collaborating with existing initiatives. So we have Berzelius and we had VASP, some of the biggest investments that is done in Sweden in AI. And we are building a Swedish GPT-3 style model right now using Berzelius. In collaboration with VASP, they have a media and language research arena, and we're collaborating on building this model, which is super interesting. We learn a lot, and it's for the Nordic languages actually, so it's not just Swedish. And we actually also on the Nobel Prize. The exhibition at Liljevalchs right now. Clara and the Sun chatbot that is built on one of the GPT models, which is, but this is this is, and I see this just as a start, building the model. Then we need to find a way of deploying it and make use of it all over in industry, in public sector, and see the real value. And also, but I also see this is one important step of us building the competence in building large-scale models in Sweden, because language is one thing. Then we will go multimodal, and what is if we work with life science and proteomics and materials and other things. But we need to start building this competence in Sweden. So it's really interesting, and we have a team working on this big model right now.
And can you just describe, for one, what is Berzelius?
So Berzelius is the biggest supercomputer in Sweden. A lot of DGX machines connected. And this is actually, I think it's one of the first projects that is actually using not really the entire Berzelius, but several nodes. So that is also a learning project from that sense, to actually use the entire Berzelius computer. So,
do you remember how many machines and GPUs there are?
No.
I think it's like 60 GGX machines, and each GGX has 8 A100 GPU in it, so it's like 480 A100 GPUs in that cluster. So it's a huge cluster. It's not similar to the Meta or the Tesla things, but still, I think they have 6,000 GGX machines. But still,
in European scale, it's fairly.
It's certainly the biggest one in Sweden in terms of AI cluster, at least. But it's really cool stuff, and it's also funded by Wallenberg partly, right?
So it's really interesting to see how good this model will be, and to start finding the real use cases. That's what I'm eager about to really see. So we have a project now starting, with healthcare, with some startups and others.
Before we go there, just to speak a bit more about GPT-3, can you just share a bit more? How did it get started? What was the purpose of it? Or can you share more about what the motivations for starting such a big and expensive project was?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm the completely right person to answer that. But I remember Magnus Sahlgren calling me and said, we need Berzelius and we need to train a big model for Swedish.
Yeah.
And then I said, yes, okay, let's start working on that. And then we have this really good collaboration with WASP and Avara, and they decided to let us use Berzelius for this. And
WASP is the Wallenberg, autonomous system and AI program.
Very good clarification.
Cool.
So it's really good that we actually are sharing this, as it is a big and expensive project. Of course, we're sharing this and doing it together with the two of the big efforts in Sweden. And also, I see, as I said, one of the main reasons to build the competence on building this kind of models.
So it's about learning, how to do this and to build big models like this, right?
Yeah, and then of course see the value of and potential value.
And what is the value? Can you just elaborate? Do you have any sense of what could the potential value be once it's trained?
Yeah. If I listen to to the team, it's almost all language tasks. I want to see it happen, and I want to see the real value outside, like in organizations. I think when it comes to summarization, to building different kind of chatbots, of course, but I don't really like chatbots, but that's another topic. I want to see it, and that's also why we very early now want to really evaluate for real use cases. So we're starting up a project right now trying to evaluate the model in several different domains and for different use cases to really see the value, because
I'm eager to go super technical here, but
maybe I'm not the right person. Let's see.
We need to have Magnus on board here.
Yeah, I think that could be a good.
That would be a good story.
Let's invite him.
and then the usefulness of different style of language models for applied versus general, and how we can squeeze more value out of what. That would be a good example.
Because there are not obvious values for this. It is, and it's a lot of money spent on this that could potentially, there is an opportunity cost, what you could otherwise have done, and
I don't think so, because then that's a good conversation to have with Magnus.
I think that's a perfect conversation to have with him.
Because it's sort of, what do we get from general purpose to very narrow purpose, much more cost effectively? That is sort of immediately simpler to put in production, so to speak. And I think
you can never put this in.
Don't go there. I'm sure there is different ways of looking at it. But you're getting very soon into the land of foundation models of meta, and like a completely different type of approach of a business model here. You can argue foundation models, and then people can tap into services, but then that's on a very different scale.
It's a lot of pre-trained and foundational and large language models that you can use. But okay, so just a quick summarization, and we're not going perhaps too technical, but for one, if you do any kind of text classification, summarization, etc., that you can't even train on your own data, it's questionable if that is the best version. If you go to any kind of leaderboard, GPT is far off the top list of that kind of task. There are, however, other values with it, and one of them is zero-shot learning. So that basically means that without fine-tuning it, because you can't basically fine-tune GPT-3, it's too big for any company to do that. So then the point is really that without fine-tuning or potentially doing prompt engineering, you can still make it useful somehow, potentially. It won't be state-of-the-art for specific tasks, but if you need to have it because you can't train it, or you want to really have a general kind of AI model that you can use, then potentially there can be some value. But it's far from obvious that spending money on this is actually the best value, I would say, for companies.
I love this podcast coming up with Magnus because you love your nerdy podcasts, and we need to have it taken all the way to the actual neural network level. But
I certainly agree that just having the experience of how to do this in preparation for doing more stuff like this going forward, going multimodal, as you said, and having models that is of real value for customers is something that is really beneficial.
And I think that these kind of models will stay for a long time. They will probably not stay forever, but right now that is the direction, and I think it's important to build the competence and to find the applications and find maybe it's not the language model, maybe it is, maybe it's when we work with life science and genomics and other things, maybe it's materials, maybe multimodal. But
and it's also like generative models like this can easily be abused as well. So it's a big ethical question about how to use this properly. So but it's a lot of questions here.
But the interesting thing is also to start learning and to understand its potential implications, and it opens up many different avenues of things that we didn't realize. That when we start doing it, we start learning about it, and then we become better and better. So there's, and I would argue there's a fairly huge research dimension in this in relation to sort of fundamentally understand what it means to operate and
the
run
research
large
value
models.
is unquestionable. The
And then
practical operational value is more questionable.
So it becomes what is the direct value, what is the indirect value, and so I think it's very interesting, and I think there's so much to be used that comes into applied approaches in many different shapes and forms out of an initiative like this. But the direct value is, it is tricky. Good. I would like to move into some more general topics. And I know, we spoke a little bit on email before, you're a fan of discussing and talking about ecosystems in general. And I am too, in many, many different ways. So how to set this up? From my point of view, so I'm going to do a fly in here from my own experiences, firsthand. In working for many years in the energy industry with Vattenfall, and realizing a fundamental value chain which was quite sequential, starting to break up. And they talk about the 3Ds: decarbonization, digitalization, and decentralization, which essentially means that it's becoming an ecosystem, and what is value, how we are monetizing, who is a producer, who is a consumer, and now the new word, who is a prosumer, a consumer that is producing energy and sends it back. It just flips the whole view of the value chain of an industry. And now I've been working with Scania for 3 years. And it becomes quite clear that we are in some ways trying to put the finger on what is the future of a transport ecosystem. We have, and Scania is discussing in terms of we are a truck manufacturing company, and how do we relate now? So this is ecosystem in business and industry. And then we realize, in order for make these ecosystems work, they will be fueled by data and algorithms in order to fundamentally secure the value chain. Okay, so here we have now ecosystem in industry, and that drives collaboration. And then we can talk about the AI ecosystem, with AI Sweden and how we make that happen. So so there's a lot of thoughts going on in my head around how important it is that we understand ecosystem and can participate in an ecosystem. So I would like to have you sort of exploring your angle into ecosystems and see where we maybe end up somewhere else.
Yeah, I think my angle is that not everyone very few organizations have the complete solution for a problem they want to solve. And you need to collaborate and you need to work with others.
Perfect.
And it can be that you have part of the data needed. It can be that you have part of the competence. It can be that someone else has the data and you have the competence, and it can be in different ways. But you need to find the ways of collaborating across organizations and be open. And open to let others work together with you and work with others. And I think having an interesting ecosystem in Sweden where people move between organizations could be one way of this. Like, you not be so scared of people leaving and go to another organization, because they will maybe find a way of collaborating and maybe find a way of getting there. So I see that we really open up and work together on things that you can work together on. Some things you should not work in an ecosystem with. But if you want to solve certain challenges, you don't have the entire solution, then you need to start finding this kind of consortiums or collaborations.
But how important is this? And this is maybe a rhetorical question. To be able to participate and actively contribute and gain value, even if in your core business or as a way to innovate your business, to me, the trajectory is that this is survival to be able to organize, to be a participant and collaborate in ecosystems. Would you agree on this? Or?
Yeah, definitely. And and it's on so many levels.
On so many levels.
And I think it is for many organizations to just start thinking a different way, that, okay, maybe we can't solve this, maybe someone else can solve this, maybe someone else has done it already. And also focusing on the big challenges that we're facing, like the energy system, for example. How can we collaborate around that? Then we need a lot of different actors collaborating and working together. If we have healthcare, yes, we have talked a lot about the regions and hospitals, but we also have a lot of other actors. You have your Google, your Apple Watch, or you have other things. So suddenly you need to work with people and organizations that you never worked with before.
And to sort of peel the onion here, how do you understand this? If this is the fact, if this is the trajectory, what's the consequences now on sort of our operating model, our steering, our way of organizing? Are companies fit in their way of setting things up to do this? Or are they needing to also shift fundamental steering and how they define roles, how they define what people should spend time on? Are we fit for this? Or is it actually we are realizing now we need this, but the old way of working, we were quite, private. Maybe in some industries we are super private. And so we have a fundamental DNA in how our patterns of our organization are set up that is against ecosystems.
Yeah, and I think the maturity on this is different between different organizations, of course. It differs a lot.
It's a maturity, for sure.
And understanding and starting to see the value of, I think if you have done a couple of this kind of ecosystem collaboration, then you see the value and then you want to do more, and then you organize yourself to or adapt to that way of working.
Can we see industries having already, some industries are already more ecosystem oriented and some are less? So there was different exposure to this in different industries, or I'm just trying to figure out different angles here.
Maybe. Nothing I can think of right now, I think.
I have a question for both of you actually here. So when we are defining ecosystems, right, the right question is actually, so what is an ecosystem and what kind of a value does it bring to every individual person that comes to
well formulated,
right? Because in order for you to have an ecosystem, somebody needs to have an interest to be in that ecosystem. You're talking about that they started working on something, of course they cannot finish it, and etc. But are they willing to share in order for them to get a piece of the pie? And if a person, let's say, that is a small consultancy company, are they willing to give their intellectual property that they can easily make money out of it for free to AI Sweden? And if they do that, what they will get from that? They would like to have leads. They would like to have more business, and etc. So you cannot create ecosystems if you cannot identify the individual aspirations of every single person that comes into the ecosystem. And this is the foundational challenge that most of these ecosystems have. It's not enough for people to just pay money to be in an ecosystem, and it's a great thing, and etc. It's like, hey, we have use cases. Are they using it? Are they using it? So if they're not using it, why are they not using it? Because maybe we have not identified what is the need of that person who is sitting there. Also, you have a challenge. A company X is starting to be part of an ecosystem. Who signed that deal? Was the CEO? Who was appointed to be there in the ecosystem? Is it the data scientist? Is the data scientist incentivized to contribute to this? Or this has been given to him just as another task that he needs to do? You see, the complexity of that becomes very, very, very big. And if this should be working, you need to know the individual interest of the person. Both for the AirDucks and you guys, what you're doing, and this is the main challenge that you will have, I believe. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that you should find the right things to collaborate on.
Exactly.
Very true.
Because you should not collaborate on everything. You should find the things where everyone finds their angle to it,
Right.
And where everyone benefits from.
Matchmaking.
Yeah.
That is where
Yeah.
the beautiful thing happens, when you can be in between two people meeting each other and they see the value in themselves.
So it should never
Yeah.
be just for collaboration. Like we need to collaborate to collaborate.
Exactly.
That's not like that.
The fundamental value and the interaction of value in an ecosystem becomes core.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you need to find the things that is safe to collaborate on. I think that is key. And start with the simple things to collaborate on, and then maybe you move into more difficult things when you need to figure out IP rights and things like that. But you can start with things that is like, like, yeah.
But in hardcore terms, any ecosystem really, to be sustainable, needs to have a very good understanding for the exchange of value. What is the fundamental effort I'm putting in, and what am I getting back? And if that is not clear, it's really tricky, right? And I think that goes for the business ecosystem of Vattenfall or AI Sweden or AI ecosystem like now. So ecosystem, I think, just following the complexity of the world, we're going in this direction. But one of the hardest challenges will be to understand the operating model, to understand the exchange of value, and what is fair and what is sort of how it will work.
Imagine this. So a person, company X, comes to Johanna and says like, hey, I saw that you have a lot of use cases, but I'm interested in this particular thing, right? Imagine the value that Johanna can bring to this discussion if he says like, I have basically a company that is working on something similar.
Yep.
And putting them only two together. So this is not the major ecosystem, it's ecosystem of two. So it doesn't have to be ecosystem, because sometimes when we talk about ecosystem, you're talking about like we first modulate what the ecosystem is. Let's build 100 components in the ecosystem. You can start with two, and then you match two. That is four.
But I think this is
And
very
then it's
important,
8.
right? Because
So you don't create ecosystem, you grow ecosystems.
that's an interesting way of. Do you agree with that? Do you create an ecosystem or do you grow it? That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, but it will never exist without the organizations and people willing to put an effort in it. So it will never exist if it's not relevant, I would say, because you cannot just come up with something that it needs to be relevant, because otherwise it will just die. And I think coming back to your comment about matchmaking and connecting, and I think that is, we do that all the time because we're talking to a lot of different organizations, and My.AI is one way of trying to scale that beyond us being present in the meeting. Like, how can we make these things happen? Because that should just happen in the ecosystem. Like people connecting to each other, find someone with a similar challenge, or...
But back to the actors, because we have different participants in the ecosystem, and we can take it down to two different partners who doesn't know each other, or doesn't know, but they're sitting with them. So you have people who can supply something. You have people who can benefit from that, and then you have the fundamental actor of orchestrating the ecosystem in terms of matchmaking, in terms of putting an agenda, creating the arena to meet, so to speak. So there are some fundamental mechanisms in an ecosystem, and sometimes it's really hard, right? Like, okay, everybody puts in an effort for this ecosystem to grow and be prosperous, but if the person putting in the effort for the orchestration of the ecosystem don't get any piece of that pie, so to speak, it won't fly. Someone needs to put in the effort, and then you can go, of course, collaborative community and try to grassroots. Well, we don't need any overheads at all, but this is really tricky, right?
Yeah, it is. It's not easy to, but it's. I think start with concrete things and make collaborations happen, and concrete collaborations, and then from that the ecosystem is growing and new things is happening, and you meet new collaborators and you try to do other things together. So, but yeah, of course, it's challenging as well.
Very good. You want to cut in on this something here? Do you have any thoughts on this, Anders?
I'm biting my tongue right now, so no.
Why are you biting your tongue? Don't bite your tongue.
I mean, I think we can connect to another topic we had before, which is, I think, of course, we should be open, as you said, in AI Sweden, but it's hard to be open about everything, as you also said. Some things we need to be closed about, and I think one of the things that we need to be closed about is data, which is not only hospitals or other companies that needs to keep closed, but I think most companies need to keep their data closed. Then you need to still find way of collaborating with others while still having data closed. And of course, you can go technical on this and federated learning, etc. But that's not the point. The really point, I think, is what things should be closed, what things should be open, and why should you have incentives to work with someone. And trying to identify that and explain that to a company, I think, is a really big challenge. Finding these kind of, the use case library that came from AI Agenda and now in AI Sweden and everything, if you have the contact, also as Goran said, to say, I want to find a specific person I can speak to, because the devil is always in the details if you want to make something work. You need to have a way to connect people. So going back to the Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, or Nokia motto, which is connecting people, I think is important. But then it's really hard to explain to a person why they should collaborate. And explain to them, you shouldn't be afraid to collaborate on this, and what is the value of doing that. It's tough.
Yeah, and I think you really need to find the right problems and the right challenges to start with, and to that everyone see the value of collaborating around. And it's definitely challenging.
And how do you make a company say, it's okay for a person that I've recruited, when talent is so important, to let them go? It must be tough, right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, we have examples also of companies having people recruited talent, and they are maybe not that challenged inside the organization, and they are part of one of our projects. And that is the way of keep them stay, make them stay.
That's a really good motivation for companies to actually do collaborate.
Yes.
Because you want to keep talents,
and you want to challenge.
You
want to challenge these people. They want challenges, and they want to solve problems and hard problems.
So it's not about letting them go; it's actually about keeping them.
Yes, and maybe also think that maybe it is a risk that this person will go to another company.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the other hand, maybe someone come to us, but yes, that is a risk you need to take. But you have that risk all the time, I think.
Yeah, but it's a big communication problem there
Yes.
in explaining this to a company, I think. But if you can make that work, I think it could be super successful, of course, but it's really tough.
Yep.
I think.
I would like to put an emphasis also on the people, right? This is very important. So you can call the entire organization and nobody says yes. I have a little bit of a sales background, right? So nobody says yes. And there is one person that has a burning agenda that he needs to solve, and that person will say yes. So sometimes speaking with the wrong person is actually much more devastating than finding the right person that you need to speak. And I believe if you call each company today about AI, you will find one person that has a burning agenda, either talent, either process, either sponsorship money, either a project, either something else that he wants to solve. And if you can hit him with the right topic, which is like, what is your challenge? What is on top of your priority? Well, I'm working on this data mesh. Data mesh, that is great. We have Hendrik from, and we have this. Where are you in the data mesh? Well, we are there and there. Great, let me put you in contact with them. You have done your job, because once they have met, they will always have you as the person who connected you. So it's the right person. It's not only the project.
Where do you see this going moving forward? Like ecosystems, collaboration, the way we're doing it now. How can we do it better?
But one thing I really want to see is if we can find this kind of moonshot projects, or one moonshot project. That is also something we talked a lot about. But I think that would be one way of really accelerating this, to have a few projects that is really needs collaboration and that really needs a lot of different organizations to work together, because then you start around one topic. We talked about diabetes, for example, early on. We can talk about the energy system, finding this kind of bigger challenges and connect a lot of people and organizations to that. I would say maybe we can accelerate this process a bit, because then we collaborate about something else, but we learn a lot of different things, and it's a bit outside of the core business, but it will still benefit a lot of, so that is one thing I think is very concrete.
And I think just giving some examples of some of the more collaborative projects you've already done, and also with Peltarian at my time there as well, I think is a good example of when it really works, because you connect companies that are complementary to what they do. And if any of these companies that all have interest, let's say in federated learning or in the language project or in the healthcare project, all of these projects, none, I think, of the single participants would be able to complete the full projects and get the learnings that we had. But by collaborating and helping each other, you were able to do really, really, challenging things.
Yep.
So perhaps, speaking about them, giving some good examples, still incentivize and make it possible for more projects like this. Because it is, I think, going back to what we said before, if we can avoid companies doing the same thing over and over again and just learning from each other instead, the win for Sweden and AI will be huge.
Yep, definitely.
I have one last angle on this ecosystem, because learning the hard way, and I think Anders' storytelling on how small piece the algorithm is in relation to putting something in operational production, in order to make AI work and be successful, we need multidisciplinary understanding, and we need to string things together from many different core disciplines. And we can start in the tech disciplines. There are several, from data engineering to AI engineering to UX engineering, if you want to have augmented AI for and you need to put it in production. So here we have come from practices. MLOps is just one piece of that puzzle in relation to all the other stuff. And then I take it further into business. We probably need to go from process thinking to product thinking and have CPOs and product ownership and stuff like this. And then we need to have DevOps. I haven't even started on the business side yet. And now we need to have a different type of organizing cross-functional business and tech people. So very, very fast, in order to succeed with AI, we get out of the core space of AI and understanding how AI fits in cohesively in a multidisciplinary puzzle. So what does that tell us about collaboration and this ecosystem and what AI Sweden needs their equivalents in other fields, or should you all of a sudden be masters of all trades? So how are you thinking about collaboration multidisciplinary in order to succeed with AI? Because it's a multidisciplinary problem to go to production.
Yes, and I think that it depends on different initiatives and different projects and different things. But one key here is to be complementary and to work with the ones that are, if we want to work with production, I mean, we should work with communities or organizations that are really good at production, and we can bring one piece of the puzzle and we can make sure that they get connected to healthcare, for example, to learn from what's done there and vice versa. And so we should not do everything. We should be really good at knowing who is really good at this, who is the subject matter expert on this, how can we connect into this. So we should not do anything.
But should all of them, even if they're in a completely different discipline, first be a partner to AI Sweden to participate?
Depends. I would say most of them are. A lot of them are already. That is not AI. As I said, a lot of our partners are not AI companies or AI organizations. So we have a lot of the, in Vinnova words, behovsägare, need owners, like the stakeholders. We have a lot of them already in the networks, but But of course, we build collaborations with the ones we need to build collaborations with. I say VASP is one great example. Of course, they are in the AI field, but we are still complementary. They're doing the fundamental research. We are working on the applied side. If we can connect that, that is a great example of how we connect to AI investments.
But this is a little bit my pet peeve, sort of what's the challenge now, and where I think there's a very different... I take the example of Data Innovation Summit that we've been running now for several years, and where the core story is like, how do we build a conference and a community that is multidisciplinary? So basically one of the few conferences where you have the data engineers, the data scientists, and machine learning engineers, also meeting from people in innovation and all that. So the community is clearly multidisciplinary, and you end up with, personified by a conference, different tracks, completely different tracks. And for me now, the ecosystem, in order to solve this, needs to be those different tracks. And now it becomes tricky, right? Because AI, if I go to, typically in a company, I have my practices in the data science domain, I put them on the table. And now I need to fit them with the data engineering domain, with the design thinking domain, yada, yada, yada. So here becomes, for me, sort of to try to wrap my head around how the community works and how we collaborate on that, and how AI is a super, super important piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece of several big ones.
Definitely.
And therefore, how do we need to organize this community now, and how do we need to contribute in different ways? Because some things makes no sense that they're driven from the AI perspective. They should be driven from the business perspective, and then we look at the AI. So this is sort of. I'm really trying hard to understand from reality of solving these projects how to get this together, right? In reality, you need to get all those different actors together, and it's not really that one actor is sort of driving the other. Potentially, I don't know.
But I think we're working with a lot of different roles in all organizations that we are working with, and I think that is key. I think we have one good example. If we go back to the GPT project now, we have one of the persons leading our language effort has a background in history and social sciences, and she is now putting up a domain subject matter expert pool on different aspects of data. So connecting the subject matter experts on historical data or on this kind of all the different kind of data to understand. That is one part, and that we have the connections from the universities. We have talked a lot about to the AI people at the universities, but still we have the universities and can talk to social sciences as well. And this is more of a research example, but then in other projects, if we take I go back to hospitals all the time, but then we working with everything from actually researchers and doctors to the one leading the hospital, to the IT department, so we have examples of where we have collaborations, and that's when the collaborations are working, when we have the different roles and connect them to, and then they can be connected to a similar role in another organization and so on. So I think that is what is starting to happen, and it's of course you need to find all these connections and all these people in all the organizations and make sure that and
in the end, not only the connections, but actually understanding how they should operate and work together, finding the common language to collaborate in the actual project, in the actual production system, and therefore also in the community.
And we need a lot of people in organizations and in this kind of other facilitating organizations or whatever you want to call it, that understands enough of the technology and enough of the domain.
So important.
And because they are really the glue here. And it's hard to find this kind of people. That is, and it's hard to describe that kind of role. It's because you need to be able to see patterns. You need to be able to see that, okay, now they're not talking. They're talking about the same thing, but they're not understanding each other. They are using different. But it's super fun when you make it work, and you see that, okay, now it will happen, now the project will happen. But I agree, it's super important, and I think it's easy to talk about AI, but when we talk about AI, we really talk about the transformation needed. And I'm a bit more focused on the technical side, maybe because that's where I put my efforts. But of course, it's connected with everything. It's so absolutely, we work with the entire network and different roles all the time.
Perfect. I think we are moving past our 2 hours, and if the listener hasn't heard, now today, more than ever, can we call this a proper AI after work? One of the visions we had was, imagine when a party is going on and then coming in, and we're having our podcast, and we can join the party. And this is exactly what is happening today. Goran, what is happening upstairs right now?
Caught me red-handed there.
Yeah, you were in the middle of something. Sorry for that.
No, I was taking the camera. So that is a very funny story. So this summer I was like very obsessed with I got very obsessed with artificial art. So Dali came out, and there is some incredible prompts that came out. So I just tweeted on LinkedIn, said like, hey, what do you think? Should we have an exhibition at the Hyper Data Club? So today is the second one, actually. So now every month we have a new exhibition. Today it's Half Schneidel. He is exhibiting his parts, and we had Claire speaking about the legal aspects of AI, because it's a tricky one.
Yeah. Legal aspect of AI art.
Yes, exactly. She's about to start now, so I think that we can actually hear that part. She's a lawyer, so it's a very new community, which is super nice, and I'm super excited about it, because it's not only data. You have artists as well. You have like lawyers. You have like
we have
critics and skeptics and all of these things. So today we have around 30 people upstairs. The exhibition is on full swing. I think we will be until 10 o'clock today. So, yeah. A very exciting time to be in AI.
What do you think about AI art and all the generative text-to-image models that are being pushed out in the last years?
I think it's super fascinating what is happening. It is, and I think most fascinating is the speed, how fast it is developing, and like you don't get surprised anymore. I think if it was during the spring, it was like every second week or every week it was this. Okay, now this new model, now this breakthrough, and now you see also video coming, and exactly. So it's happening at a incredible speed. I think that is, and it's also interesting how the prompting becomes an art and a new skill, and some people are really good at it, some people are not good at it.
I wonder when we see the first job ad saying, I want to hire a prompt engineer.
Yes.
I'm sure there are.
Prompt engineer.
Yeah, that would definitely, if we'll use that kind of models.
Unpack prompt engineer, what are we talking about?
Simply that these kind of models, both GPT-3, the text models, and also the image models, text to image, they can't really be fine-tuned for what you do. So what you do instead is you add a prompt or a description or a piece of text saying, this is what I want to have generated. So you can be generating text or images or video or even audio these days.
So now you need to be very good at writing those prompts to get what you want.
Yeah, exactly. That is how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a new art form.
Yeah, so Dali released a prompt book, it's called, and it's like a very massive catalog of yes.
So you can learn how it thinks and works.
But what is beautiful with AI-generated art, that you can actually do something which was not done before. For me, at least, this is in a two major aspects. The first thing, you can take poems, for example, Shakespeare put it, and then put it into the prompt and see what is going to happen. And some very ridiculous things happen, right? The second thing is that basically, even if the art is finished, it's never finished, because if you add another word, the art continues. So it's not like Mona Lisa is painted once and then it goes. You will have Mona Lisa in the sun, Mona Lisa in the dark, and whatever it is. Like it's beautiful. It's a crazy thing, but it's a new toolkit. It's not like the AI doesn't generate the art. It's actually still what is called, you have like little.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty much.
But it's also interesting how you can, by prompting, get the, if we talk about the GPT model and the exhibition at Liljevalchs now, where the team had prompted the model to act like Clara in Clara and the Sun, and to answer in that way, it works really good. And when you read the prompt, it is super interesting because it's not obvious, I think, how to prompt this, and that you explain that this is a friendly chatbot. It's a robot that is always answering polite, and she doesn't always answer polite, but but still. And I think it's super fascinating how you can steer by just prompting, and it's just small nuances that really changes everything, and that is
And I think we can have this debate if who is the artist? Is this art, and is this someone as an artist? But if you go completely meta on the whole topic, think 100 years from now, the artist simply has a new canvas to work on, and he's a prompter.
Not canvas. A toolkit. It's like a brush.
Yeah, okay,
it's a new
good.
brush.
It's a new brush. Sorry, actually, it's a new brush.
I mean, this has been existing for years now in Adobe Photoshop and etc. When you do demasking and all this other stuff. So it's not something that is, but the technology behind it and how you prompt it, then it's different. So you merge them and you create them. So.
And the accuracy and performance of it, of course, is increased.
Some of them, the quality of them are not good. So, for example, for one of the exhibition, we were needed to extract them, and then we needed to enlarge them. But then when you enlarge them, you get pixelation, so it didn't work very well. So then you need to work with the post-processing in order to print them. So it's like quite a lot of things.
Yeah. What do you think about AI going forward? We're seeing, so many things happening. We're seeing, the large language models like GPT-3 in general. They just scaling up everything. We're training on more and more data. We're seeing new type of application, especially in the generative side. You're seeing like multimodal kind of models going that can, handle different types of data together. Are you afraid about, the what's going to happen in 5 years when it comes to AI?
I wouldn't say I'm afraid. I think the important part here is also to make sure that we are part of leading the development and not just being passive, because I think that is a risk if you think it's scary and you think it's dangerous, we should not go into that. But if you're not part of leading it, then you are then others will do it. So we need to take an active part.
To not be a victim of whatever someone else has done.
Exactly. So we need to take an active part. I think we should definitely take things seriously. We need to start working a lot with evaluation. We need to work very applied with ethics, not just talking about it, work concrete projects. What does this mean? And it will not be the same in all projects. You need to evaluate based on the application all the time. We need to find good ways of doing that. I think that is key. But then we should not, why seeing this big models and everything, and it's super impressive, but we should not forget about the simple things and the smaller projects and the more boring projects maybe.
Exactly, and simple solution that can be more than sufficient for any kind of company.
And I think we need to focus on both. We cannot let one go or depend. So we need to focus on both and make sure that we do it in a way that we feel comfortable with and that we can really be proud of, if I'm talking about Sweden now, and then learn from the best. And
are you excited about working or living in an AI-driven world in 10 years, or are you more scared of it? Excited or scared?
I'm excited, definitely.
As well.
Me as well.
And I think it's super fun to be in the middle of this happening. I talked to a colleague. I watched the series on Netflix, the Halt and Catch Fire. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about when the computers came, and I said that I wish I was living in the 80s and worked on this. And
then you realize this might be bigger.
Yes, and then my colleague said, yes, but you are also in this kind of transformation. Okay, yes, I am.
Very true.
I'm excited, and I think we will see really bad applications, and we will see good, and we will see. We don't know yet, I think, where the big value will come. We see it in some examples, but still, and it will be really interesting to see.
How will we look back at 2022? Are we used maybe in the beginning?
I mean,
Is this pivotal moments happening now?
Johanna is young enough, to know, like in 50 years, she can speak to her grandchildren and say, "Do you remember the days when we actually drove our cars ourselves? That was crazy, but it's true. We actually sat behind a wheel and drove our cars, right?"
Yeah, and I think the development we see with large-scale models now really tells that this will go so fast. And
the last things here really nails home Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns. So you don't see it, and then all of a sudden now, I think in a couple of areas now, unprecedented speed in terms of evolution of some a phenomena. So I think something is happening right around the corner right now in terms of how we will feel the speed that might some people have not felt before. Is that a good ending?
I think so.
All right, last questions. What's next in your life? What are you planning on? Or what's something cool, fun happening? Something you're looking forward to?
Yes, a lot of things. Of course, continuing building and setting up new initiatives, new projects, make things happen for real. And also being past the pandemic, start traveling a lot again, meeting our potential collaborators internationally, start the international work and even more, do a lot more international things is important.
Anything private?
Anything private? No, I have my knitting and crocheting projects going on on the analog side.
Super nice.
Yeah, my nerdy side, doing some. No, I don't have any big things. I moved to Stockholm just 1.5 years ago. That was really a big change. I think it's nice to just settle down, enjoying Stockholm and the opportunities here.
Super cool. Last question. Do you have anyone you would like to recommend to join this podcast?
That's a really good question. I think I have several. I was thinking of Ann-Marie Wennberg, that is the hospital director at Sahlgrenska Hospital. Is one person. She's really understanding the value, and she is really brave, I would say, in applying and have another view, I think, than most guests. Then I would see some skeptics on the podcast as well.
Yeah, good idea.
Have some debates and maybe a minister and politicians at some point talking about democracy.
Wow, good angles. I think with that, thank you for an awesome show today, Johanna.
Thank you.
And we will have some after work now together, and maybe after work, and together
AI art
with some AI art in it as well this time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night.